Hey BC, Dave here. Uh, hadn't been on in a few days. I had a car hit a telephone pole here the other day and knocked our electricity out here, and then just shortly after that I was online and my online and phone went out, and I thought it might have been related to the with the power going out. So I saw Encore, which is our electric service, go by, and then my computer and everything was still out. So I called AT&T, who is our my provider here, and was inquiring about that, and come to find out that somebody had stolen the copper wiring that goes into one of the I don't know, one of the connection things that they use online to transmit all that type of stuff, which the guy told me like they didn't even steal $2 worth of copper wiring, but that was enough to knock my service out for a day or so, along with the lady that's a neighbor over here by me. But the older I get, the more astounded how weird the world can be at times. I can't imagine anybody doing something like that. I mean, I don't know how they didn't know that they'd get electrocuted or something from doing something like that, but that's the way it goes. And as they say, stuff in life happens, so you have to kind of roll with the punches. But anyway, I was listening to some Steve Reich's the other day. This is a sextet, 6 marimbas. It's actually 2 compositions, one on one side and one on the other. And if you're familiar with Steve Reich at all, which most people have heard of this album, which is on ECM, which is music for 18 musicians. And it's a good one, but so is this other one. This one is a little bit different, although the album cover again is kind of indicative of what the sound is like, which and so is the other one. It is kind of repetitive in its theme, and like the first side is called Sextet, and the second side is called 6 Marimbas. And with the 6 marimbas on the second side, he kind of does his similar, the way he composes music is he'll start, one musician will start, and then another musician will start behind that, and then another one, kind of like a round, like row, row, row your boat in a way. But it kind of forms, once they start going, it'll kind of form this tapestry of sound that kind of pulses, and then he can change that pattern. As the music goes along, he can drop out a player or add 2 players to a similar note or whatever passage to create these different patterns and tapestries. But then, like on Sextet, he has marimbas, vibraphones, a bass drum, tom-toms, and piano and synthesizer. So there's some other instruments on the first side, and pretty good album. If you like Steve Reich and his music, then check that out. This is another one I was listening to by him. This has several composers on it, and you can see it there. It's got Steve Reich, Vermont Counterpoints, along with Philip Glass Facades. Frank Brecker does the Stonehenge, and then he's got some Debussy on there. And I'm not familiar with that bottom composer. Maybe he's French or something. Joel Viet, something like that. But evidently on this one, which is on Angel Records, the composer that did all this, which is Ransom Wilson, was getting into minimal music and asked all these different, well, the other composers were, you know, were probably dead when he was doing this, but with Steve Reich, you know, this one was done before the 18 musician ones, and I think they're just, from what he says on the back in the notes, it was just Steve Reich and 2 other musicians, and then the flute player. You know, this is kind of a wind instrument album, or a wind ensemble, and so if you like wind ensembles, that's the way to go. As far as the Philip Glass song on here, supposedly he got that piece of music from, if you're familiar with Steve Reich's Chiaroscuro, which is the soundtrack to the movie of the same name, which is an Indian word meaning life out of balance. Well, the piece on here, which is Facades, came from that piece. And then there are, like I said, 3 other pieces to go with it. But Ransom Wilson, you know, plays flute on here, and various other, I think he plays some other wind instruments on here as well. But and then there are other, I believe, other you know, wind instruments by other musicians on here as well. But anyway, it's a really good album if you like more modern 20th century music. Then this week there was I actually saw a Alan Holdsworth concert that was shot in Japan early in his career. And if you're familiar with him, he's a British guitarist that the first time I heard of him, I'm not sure where I heard of him first actually. I think it was either on that UK album or I don't know, one of those British albums of that nature. It might have been on this one here. This is got me interested in gong. By the way, I'll leave a link to the Alan Holdsworth concert below. It's up on YouTube if you want to, you know, take a look at it. But it's a really astounding concert. I was amazed even earlier in his career. He's very modest. He's a very modest guitar player. He died a couple of years ago. But you know, his tone and his technical ability to play the guitar and all that is just, you know, par excellent really as far as I was concerned. I mean, like the whole time I was watching that concert, it takes a while for it to get going, but it's like just one of those, for me anyway, kind of jaw-dropping concerts as far as technical level. And the bass player on that album is really excellent. And the drummer, I think his name was Chad Wackerman or something like that. He was an excellent drummer as well. And it really takes a really good drummer for me to, you know, perk up and take note of the drummer's expertise. But you can see it pretty well in this one. I mean, the guy's just, you know, super great. But this is Gong Espresso, which Alan Holdsworth is on. And this is different from, this is more like jazz rock. This is different from the early psychedelia or psychedelic band Gong. But and I'm not even sure if any of the, there may be some early Gong people on here, but I really don't know the history of this album. But I just bought it because Holdsworth was on here. And there's some stuff like a vibraphone on here, and various instruments, congas, and violin, tenor sax, and flute. But if you're into progressive rock or progressive jazz, it's definitely an album to pick up along with this second one, which is Gong 2, Espresso 2. And this one also has the guitarist Mick Taylor that played with the Rolling Stones there for a while. He's on it as well. And it's just a continuation of the same way that the first album went, which is, I was all for it because I really enjoyed the first album as well. But like I said, if you're into guitar and jazz rock or progressive jazz rock, those are really good ones to pick up. This is an earlier one that where I'd heard Holdsworth on. This is Bill Bruford's. He put this group together, I guess, or as a member of it. But it's got Bill Bruford and Alan Holdsworth again on guitar, and Dave Stewart and Jeff Berlin. I know I've heard of Jeff Berlin. He plays bass and does the vocals, and of course Bruford does the drums, and Dave Stewart, I think he played in National Health, if I'm not mistaken, or I don't know. I know I've heard of him before and probably got some albums with him on, but I think he was in either some of those British albums like National Health and golly, I can't remember now, maybe Egg or Gilgamesh, some of those albums like that kind of got a little bit Canterbury. But there was that one, and then this one as well, which is another Bill Bruford album. This one has a few more people on it, I believe. And John Godsell, who was into Brand X, is also on this one. And just some other people. But the reason I mainly picked it up was for the Holdsworth. This is UK. And it has Eddie Jobison on it, who plays violin and keyboards and electronics, and John Wetton plays bass, who was in King Crimson and sings the song, and then Bill Bruford on guitar as well. This one, for me, barely gets going, and it gets over too soon, and I wish they'd made like a double album or something and extended the jams in it, or maybe did a live album to go along with it. But it gets over too soon about the time it gets going for me, and I always am left wanting a little bit more. And I do have some other Alan Holdsworth albums, like I know on that concert that he did in Japan, he had done Road Games, and I have an album around here that's on cassette called Alan Holdsworth IOU, which was another one of his earlier albums. And he's done many other solo albums, which really, if you want to hear Alan Holdsworth, aside from those Gong albums, those Alan Holdsworth solo albums are the way to go. I mean, they aren't just him on guitar, they have other musicians playing with him, kind of like in these concerts. But yeah, really are worth picking up if you like jazz guitar or progressive guitar. Missed Holdsworth playing over here in Denton, Texas at UNT. I wish I'd made a little bit more of an effort. Well, he was going to do a talk, giving a lecture up at UNT to the musicians up there, which is kind of like a music school, noted for that. That's the same school that Lyles Mays went to. And but before that, it was on Sunday, which was the day before his talk. He was playing at a small club, the Klezmer Theater, or the Kessler Theater, there in Dallas, which is in kind of South Dallas. And I remember I woke up that day and just kind of saw where he was playing, and quickly emailed my brother and asked him if he wanted to go see it. Very spur of the moment. But boy, I wish I had kind of known about that, where I could have made plans. We didn't go because it was just, I'd have to just about get in my car and go over there and then try and secure tickets, which, we probably could have gotten. But it was just too spur of the moment for either one of us, but we both for sure were contemplating about going over and seeing that, and I wish I had now. Another concert that was on this week, if you have a Access TV, which is AXS. Access TV is kind of like music television. For me anyway, they have kind of taken the place of what MTV used to be, which, you know, that's way back in the 80s. MTV, since, I don't know, the late 80s going into the 90s on, have really been nothing but trash TV as far as I'm concerned, with Jersey Shore and all that kind of mess. And we have it on our cable here, but it's not worth watching. Neither is VH1 as far as I'm concerned. And so Access TV is really the music television that I, watch now. And they'll have, interviews. Dan Rather's got a show on there where he interviews different musicians. I know he interviewed Robert Plant here recently, and oh golly, he's interviewed people like Geddy Lee from Rush, and just a whole host of Greg Allman. He interviewed him. A whole host of musicians that are interesting. And but anyway, they had a concert on here this past week with Van Morrison, and the concert was a concert from the San Francisco Jazz Center, and it was like, I think it was 4 members, and one of the main guys in the band played, I believe it was a Hammond organ. His name was Joey DeFrancesco, Joey DeFrancesco, and he was a great organist. In fact, all those guys in that band were, par excellent. Like I said, I mean, it was just a great concert all the way around. But they were promoting a new album called "You're Driving Me Crazy" that should be out sometime this month if it's not out already. I could have, I should have checked it out, but this was one of the early Van Morrison albums I bought. I'll have to pick up that album, "You're Driving Me Crazy," when it comes out, because that concert that they put on the other night was just so excellent. I mean, they played for like 2 hours, and I was, they did a couple of covers that he did in the past, like Moondance, of course. I think Moondance was one of the maybe the first album I bought by him, and I still love listening to this song. It's got Crazy Love and Into the Mystic, and just is a classic album all the way around. But the whole time that concert was playing, it just made me real curious how, like, the concert was 2 hours in length, and I wondered how long they, had to rehearse to make this concert, to get familiar with each other and play. Of course, they're such accomplished musicians. Maybe not as long as what I'm thinking. I mean, like, it was evident that the guy that was playing organ, he'd been doing it since the day he, got near an organ. And then Van Morrison played sax. There was a sax player, and he played also bass, guitar, and another wind instrument. And then the guitar player, I can't recall his name, but he had kind of a Wes Montgomery style, the way he played his guitar, kind of jazzy and kind of smooth, And then the drummer that they had was very good too. It was just an excellent concert all the way around. After I bought, like, this album, the CD here, Moondance, I might have had that on vinyl at one time, but I went back and bought this one because I'd always heard so much about it. This is Astral Weeks, and it's kind of a song cycle. But to tell you the truth, I was a little bit disappointed in this, and maybe my expectations were just too high for it. But I've listened to it throughout the years, and I won't say it's my favorite Van Morrison album. That would probably be one of these other ones like Moondance, or this one here, which is Saint Dominic's Review. But I've come to respect this album. It's just not one of my favorite ones by him. This was another one that I picked up, Tupelo Honey, by him a long time ago. when it came out back in the 80s. And you know, it too is just a really excellent album, particularly if you like, you know, the sound of acoustic guitar and songs and ballads and stuff like that. But you know, it's got the song Tupelo Honey on here, and I'm not going to be able to read all the other ones, so take it out of here. But When That Evening Sun Goes Down, and Moonshine Whiskey. But Wild Nights, I believe that was the song they did on the radio. But another Van Morrison album, nonetheless. I mean, the guy is just a very accomplished musician. And I guess when musicians like of him and his caliber, and all the guys that were in that band that played in that concert the other night, I guess they just have a natural ability towards music, or are born that way, or, you know, God-given talent. I mean, I just don't know. But and it's not like I'm saying that they don't have to practice. Of course they had to practice along with it. But I've just noticed the musicians of that caliber, they had this special spark that you know, rises up, you know, them above, you know, the rest of us mortal humans. This was Avalon Sunset. I think this is the last Morrison album I bought that I really thought was really good. He's done some albums that are a little, I won't say are mediocre, but are a little bit spotty as far as the maybe some of the songs on it. But really, I mean, he's such a great musician. I think, you know, any of his albums are worth picking up. I kind of tend to like his earlier period, like I've shown, and sort of that mid period as well. You know, I've even got like greatest hits packages by him as well, because you know, sometimes I just want to hear, you know, a lot of the songs that came out on the radio and that he's done as hit singles that have been on the radio. But yeah, if you got Access TV, you know, I try and track that concert down or watch for it on Access TV. Sometimes I don't feel like I show enough rock or rock-oriented things on here. This is by Ozric Tentacles. They're a British band. It's a cutout album that I found. They're kind of a British jam band, I guess you could say. I believe there's two brothers in here. And, you know, there's a guitar, a flute player, a drummer, and a bass player, and a synthesizer player. But they're kind of like a synthesizer, you know, a little bit oriented, but more jammy. I mean, it's a pretty much a high octane record, and like Ozric Tentacles have released, you know, oh golly, maybe 10 to 15 albums. I don't know how many. And maybe if there's a negative criticism about them, it's that their albums kind of sound all alike, so it's kind of hard to, you know, I couldn't see having all their albums myself, but I've got like 3 or 4 of them. But yeah, this one here is if you're into a high octane jam band, and this is a good one to get. This one's called Strangitude. And then I was listening to this last night. This is Lost in Translation, Axiom. This is Bill Laswell put together band. It's a 2 CD set, and it's kind of like a dark dub ambient album. There are some guys on here that are with was on In the Orb, which I'm not real familiar with the Orb, but overall this is a 2 CD set. Like I said, it's on the Axiom label, so if you're into I don't know, like dark ambient, that type thing, it'd be worth checking out. And then I saw Chris Kebler's he had one the other day on piano music, and I liked a lot of the stuff that he was showing, so I picked this one up. he was talking about this pianist here, Stefan, Schleiermacher. But excuse me, this is his interpretations of John Cage, and it's on the MDG series label. But this is volume 1 of it. There's a volume 2 as well, and this is just acoustical piano, and that's it. And that I kind of been kind of been in the mood for something like that here lately. Just unadorned acoustical piano music. And I saw Christopher's piano music video, and he was talking about this guy, and went online and found this, and so picked it up. I haven't even listened to it yet, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be pretty good. So anyway, just hope you're enjoying your music. And it's rainy here today, and I'm sure we'll have some more rain through the weekend. But just sitting around the house, and been enjoying watching a few concerts on TV, which I've really enjoyed. And hope everybody out there is doing well. We'll talk to you later.